Okay. Welcome, everybody. We'll give everyone a few minutes to sign in. And while we're waiting, we'd love to see where you all are calling in from. Ginny, where are you calling in from?
Oh, me. I'm in Chicago.
Amazing. Beautiful, cold Chicago.
That's right.
Meanwhile,
Yep.
I'm in beautiful, warm Haifa, Israel. Nice international webinar we have going on. Where are you guys all from? If you guys are able to tell us, that would be awesome.
I see some names.
All right, LA, Columbus.
LA, yay. Virginia,
Now,
Cincinnati.
Awesome. More Midwesterners. I'm from Indianapolis myself originally, so I hope we get some Hoosiers out here. Awesome. So as people start rolling in, yes, Indianapolis, there we are. Amazing. So as people start rolling in, we're going to do a quick poll. And what the question is going to be is, what day is your favorite day to pitch stories to the media? So the poll has been launched. Just as everyone's coming in. Ginny, what about you? What day is your main day to pitch to?
I usually do Tuesdays because, Mondays I'm still trying to get reacclimated to being off for 2 days. So usually it's Tuesdays for me.
Yeah, I mean, we usually do Tuesdays and Wednesdays out here. What's nice about doing PR from Israel is that Sunday is a work day for us. So while everyone else is still relaxing, we get a day to really build out our pitches, build out our media lists, and start sending them out.
That is really nice.
For us is the big one.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's always nice to have a day when nobody else is working.
Yeah. All right, so let's give it another minute or so. All right, it looks like as people are rolling in, we're getting more and more, we're getting more results. All right, I'm going to end the poll real quick. Hang on. Looks like there's still a few more people that want to respond. All right, we hit the 80% mark, so I'm gonna hit end poll. Okay, and here are the results. As we can see, nobody's pitching on Monday. No one. Tuesday, far and away, is the biggest day to pitch, followed by Wednesday. Very few on Thursday, and just a tiny little bit on Friday.
So you know what? We should all be pitching Friday through Monday. There you go.
I'm sure that journalists would love to be receiving torrents of mails to their inbox. Yeah. So okay. Awesome. So let's get into things a little bit. So of course today we're going to be talking about building your PR strategy for 2023. Again, for those who just joined, welcome and thank you all for being here. We're speaking with Gini Dietrich today, and we're going to be covering just what are we going to be doing for the next year and how are we going to build it out and what strategies are we going to be changing. So just a few introductions. My name is Eitan. I'm the communications manager for Propel PRM. I use the platform every day to get earned media coverage for the company. Before this, I worked at GKPR, one of the premier PR tech firms in Israel, and I represented companies from seed stage to Fortune 100. And before that, I was a senior editor at Ynet News, which is the English language edition of Israel's largest newspaper. And I'm really excited today to introduce you all to our guest, Gini Dietrich. Gini is the founder, CEO, and author of Spin Sucks, the host of the Spin Sucks podcast, and the author of Spin Sucks, the book. She's also the creator of the Peso model, has crafted a certification for it in partnership with Syracuse University. She's also run and grown her own agency for the past 15 years, is the co-author of Marketing in the Round, co-host of Inside PR, and co-host of the Agency Leadership Podcast. Wow, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us. Really appreciate it.
I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be a fun topic. So let's get into it.
Exactly, for sure. So this, what's on the agenda for today. We're going to speak about journalist engagement with pitches quarter over quarter and year over year. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at in terms of how long it takes to get a story published. Of course, we're going to talk about something new that we've been doing at Propel, which is trending news topics and how they're being pitched. And then finally, we're going to talk about the peso model and how it fits into your PR strategy. So once again, right before we get started, just a little bit of promotion. We're going to a little bit about us, Propel. It's the first PR tool built by PR people. Our CEO, Zach Cutler, founded it in 2019 after running his own agency for about 9 years. And in his agency years, Zach was always on the lookout for better technology to manage all of his agency's campaigns, journalist relationships, team productivity, and business outcomes. Finding none that suited his needs, he decided to build his own, and he created the first CRM specifically for PR on the market. Now we're on a mission to democratize and make PR technology accessible for the masses. We support leading brands and agencies like Real Chemistry, Microsoft, and NPR, and we're doing all this by reimagining earned media. We've launched many first-of-a-kind features for PR workflows, insights, and analytics, and we have the industry's only native Gmail and Outlook email plugins. So let's get right into it. First of all, so something that we at Propel came out with yesterday is our quarterly barometer report. And in this, we actually track what pitch open rates are looking like, what pitch response rates are looking like, and what types of pitches are getting the most coverage, what types of pitches are really getting the most responses from journalists, all to enable us as an industry to do better. So let's move over to the next slide where we have some metrics. What we found in this most recent barometer is that the average response rate has gone down. Now, this isn't necessarily surprising because this has kind of been what's been happening for the past several years. But our latest report showed something a little unusual. We saw there was a huge decrease. We found in Q4 of 2022, journalists were only responding to 2.66% of all pitches sent via the platform. Now, there were almost 500,000 pitches sent, which means that there's only about 13,000 pitches of the 500,000 that got any sort of response. What's even more interesting and quite almost depressing, if you will, is that this is a 20% decrease from the previous quarter. Now, we were thinking, okay, like, what's the reason for this? And I think I see someone here actually mentioning this, was it the holidays? And we thought the exact same thing, like, this has to be the holidays. Well, we looked back at our previous barometers and we saw that between Q3 of 2021 and Q4 of 2021, during the holidays and during Q4, the response rate only dipped by about 9 or 10%. 20.6 is way more than that. It's double. It's actually more than double. So we're thinking, and we're going to be looking into this a little bit more as the year progresses, but we're thinking that this has a lot to do with the mass journalist layoffs that have been going on. I'm sure that you've all heard, as PR professionals, and especially you, Jenny, that, BuzzFeed has cut major elements of its staff. CNN has cut, BBC cut 400 journalists. Protocol doesn't exist anymore. Like one of the premier tech newspapers just isn't there. Business Insider has frozen hiring for the first time in its history and is debating letting people go. And on top of that, you have a lot of mergers of different media conglomerates that are also leading to more layoffs. And exactly as Caroline just mentioned, Gannett had over 400 layoffs, and my former local newspaper, my hometown of Indianapolis, just had to lay off about 50 people in addition to that. So, what is your immediate gut reaction to these findings?
That's terrible, first of all. But you know what this reminds me of, and this is going to age me, but this really reminds me of 2009, when we saw mass layoffs at media outlets. We saw the media completely shift. I remember, for my entire career, as most of you, it does not age me. Right. Because I was 22 in 2009. That's exactly right. It does not age me. But I remember, you spend your career building relationships with journalists. And I had a fantastic relationship with somebody at USA Today. And he called me in February of 2009 and he said, "Hey, I'm in Chicago. Do you want to meet for breakfast?" And I was like, "Yeah, duh." So I went down to the Ritz and I met him for breakfast. And he said to me, "I'm being furloughed." And I remember thinking, "Oh no, this is terrible." Like that pit in your stomach, right? And then of course he was laid off after that. And he no longer is a journalist, which is terrible, just from his perspective, but also from a communicator's perspective. We're looking at the loss of all of these relationships that we spent time building that we can no longer rely on for the earned media credibility that we do in our work. So it definitely feels like 2009 all over again. I will say that we evolved and we've become accustomed to the changes. One of the things we'll talk about at the very end, so I don't want to rain on my own parade, are things that we can do in times like this. But yeah, this is depressing.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. And so, I mean, I guess we're going to get to that a little bit later on. I would like to hear more about, what happened between 2009 and 2012? What did the media landscape look like and how did it shift? And it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, unless you'd like to speak about this now, but back in those days, there wasn't as much social media coverage. People were still getting the majority of their news from mainstream outlets.
Right.
Whereas now people are mainly turning towards podcasts, they're turning towards TikTok, Instagram influencers, Substacks. So, it'll be interesting to get your take on that. Actually, I'd love to hear about what happened in the past, but I wanted to also hear your thoughts on what do you think this will do to the way people consume news and information, given that these options exist today that didn't exist maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
For sure. One of the things that we've all experienced is misinformation and disinformation. And I think that's going to continue because as media outlets are either furloughing or laying journalists off or completely going out of business, that the fifth estate, the thing that we've all come to rely on from a credible standpoint, authority standpoint, is disappearing. And more of us are turning to our friends and our family, and to your point, TikTok and Instagram to get our news and our information. So that will continue. And I think the communicator's job from an earned media perspective is going to shift more into fighting the misinformation. And I'll give you an example. We have a client that we're going through a pretty big crisis with right now. And the community members are creating rumors. And you like sit here and you're like, that's not no, that's not even true. And then they're going to social media and they're saying, they're saying their lies, they're making up these rumors and they're creating gossip, and then it gets shared and then it, amplifies and it becomes viral. And so the role of the communicator is going to be continuing to fight the misinformation. And right now in that particular example, we're working with regulatory agencies to fight that, and just to have them not, it used to be that we'd go to the media and say, okay, here's actually what's going on. Now we're going to the EPA and the other regulatory agencies to have them create statements that we can then use through our own social media efforts.
Right. And I think that's only going to get more difficult as time goes on.
Right.
Unfortunately, public trust all over the world in governments is going down. And it's just going to make our jobs that much more difficult. But, we are PR people, we are communicators, and, if something's difficult, we tend to run towards it. Exactly.
We will get there. We'll be fine.
Exactly. So now let's take it on to the other side. You have a major blog, you have a major PR blog, Spin Sucks. And now that there are fewer people, there are fewer people that are covering the media, there are fewer just journalists in general. What are you seeing from your end now that there just seem to be less people to pitch? Are you seeing that there are more people pitching your blog? And how is that working?
Yes. And it's really, you guys, it's so bad. It's so bad. The pitches are so bad. Like nobody does their research. Nobody, I think I said this on the last webinar I did with you, but I have a podcast and it's just me. It's solo hosted. I don't have guests. I've never had a guest. I talk about news, or I talk, current events, or I talk about things like how to implement the peso model. And I do that from a thought leadership perspective, and I don't bring guests on. You would not believe the number of pitches I get from PR people pitching their CEO to be a guest on the podcast. Literally, all you have to do is go through the first 30 seconds of one episode to figure out there are no guests. So bad.
Yeah. I mean, and that's all it takes. It's just a little bit of research. I think though that PR pros are just so, like, given the state of things right now, and given this 2.66% response rate, again, that means 98.4% of pitches are just not being responded to. No, right. Thank you. Right. No, yeah, let's do something. I think that people are getting a little bit more stressed out. And I think that this is, a time that we as communicators need to kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and really, as opposed to trying to just spray and pray to send to as many different journalists as possible, we have to just take a breath and then find the person who we believe to be the best choice for our message, maybe 5-10 people, and then hyper personalize it. Make it so that you show that you know what they do, you know what they think, and that you're going to be relevant for something that they're doing. Otherwise, I don't see a way to really overcome this, this disappointing metric, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, Adina says here that it's, as a podcast host, they don't even listen to the trailer or look at the cover art or read the show notes. Like, any of those things would give you an idea of what the podcast is about, if they have guests and what kind of guests they have. Like, though you don't have to do a whole ton of research. I was at a conference it was pre-pandemic, so it was probably 2019, and Mitch Joel was speaking, and I remember him saying, you can send 10 pitches that are highly qualified and highly personalized and have 100% response, or you can send 1,000 spray and pray news releases, pitches, and have 2% response. So which would you rather? Would you rather have 100% response and have 10 articles or 10 podcast appearances or whatever it happens to be? Or would you rather have 2% of your 1,000? Like, start to figure out the numbers and say, okay, I'm going to spend time on the 10 that are really important to us, and I'm going to nail every single one of them. And then that way you're not so stressed out. And now I will say that with the caveat that I know some bosses like for you to show how many people you're pitching. I understand that. But eventually we have to be able to say across the board, it's not strategic. Spraying and praying is not the way that we should do it. And going the route of being really strategic about this and being really targeted will actually get us the results that we want.
100%. And I think also, like, getting to your point about just having a giant media list and spreading your message out to everybody, I think that, building a media list, the majority of people use spreadsheets. It's unfortunate, but they do. Right. And filling in a spreadsheet,
yes.
Like, if you want to get 50 people, that'll take you 5 hours. How about you spend that 5 hours researching 10 people, hyper personalizing your pitches, and then getting actual results coming in, as opposed to like searching for some random niche reporter's email that you're going to send a mass pitch to. I mean, I think
okay, this is totally taking us off track a little bit, and I apologize, but I think this is important. Eitan, you wrote an article for Spin Sucks probably about a year ago, and you talked about how I hate this word, but newsjacked. And I'll look it up really quickly. I haven't done it yet, but you're just reminding me of this. Talk about the idea of what you did and how you use current events and trends to be able to get Propel into articles.
Yeah, sure. So
I'm looking it up.
What this newsjacking was about was what was the actual word for it? So it was I actually forget what the subject was. It was, oh wow, there's been so many pitches in the past year.
No, that's not it. It was,
Shoot.
I don't remember either. I can't get my
Right.
fingers on it right now.
It was about disabilities in tech. And for those who don't know,
Yes.
Zach has an ambulatory disability, our CEO. And he'd never let that stop him from carrying out his dream, starting 2 companies and moving forward. And so this had just popped up. I was brand new, so for me this was the news, Jackie. This was like my first week on the job, and so I started looking around to see, okay, well, who's writing about this right now? Who has written about this in the past? Who's most likely to write about it? And so what I did was, instead of making a media list of like 50 or 60 people, I just took the top 10 people and the 10 publications I really wanted us to be in. And I just wrote a detailed, heartfelt message pitch to each one of these people. And what ended up happening with that was, not only was I able to, well, I mean, there's a lot there. First of all, with Propel, thankfully, I was able to build a pretty decent sized media list in a very short amount of time. But what I was also able to do was use the time, instead of pitching to like 50 or 60 people, I was actually able to focus in and find what really made them tick and get them to understand why who my CEO is relevant for not only world, not only for this particular subject, but why they're relevant to them personally. And what we ended up getting out of that was a really great relationship with a Forbes journalist who we've been in contact with on and off ever since for the past year. So, again, it comes back to getting to know what each journalist actually likes to read, actually likes to see, and then write a genuine message to them, write a genuine pitch that's not going to be spray and pray, that's not copied and pasted, so that they see, okay, this was actually directed to me, and that'll get them much more interested in you. And I can tell you, as a senior editor at Ynet, whenever I got pitches that were directed at me, that I knew that the person took the time to figure out what I liked and what I wanted. Right. And this is going to sound horrible, but what I wanted to hear, then I was more likely to run the story or to interview the person than I would have otherwise been.
So I just put it in, I put the link in the chat, but the results were you ended up sending 50 customized pitches. You got 30 opens. Yeah. So that conversion rate is high. You received 5 responses, which is a 10% response rate compared to the 2.66 that we're looking at here. And then you got the Forbes interview opportunity. So
exactly,
it really is. And I know this is counterintuitive, but and we'll talk about subject lines in a few minutes as well. But I even get emails that say that in the subject line, it says news release in all caps and then colon and then whatever the topic is. I just delete those because I know it's not coming to me personalized and it's not something that I even need to pay attention to. So you have to be thinking about how to hyper customize and personalize to the individual that you're pitching.
Exactly. So yeah, I 100%. And so if we move on to the next slide, it is tough when those individuals just aren't there. It appears to be the case, and we can see in this chart just this drop off in Q4. What we found to be interesting, and we'll start talking about this a little bit farther on in the webinar, but PR pros are following kind of in terms of building the pitch, how it looks physically. They seem to be following like the advice that we're seeing. But again, like because of this pitch, and we are going to be continuing to follow this throughout the year, it appears that there's just fewer people to go to.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, do you first of all, not only what other factors could this, possibly be, why would this possibly be happening? But what is something that you and your firm have been doing to, change the strategy that you personally been doing or that you're telling your people to do?
You're not going to like this answer.
Go for it.
We're doing more owned media. because it's so challenging. And what we're finding is the owned media, the content is actually driving the earned media. So that's where we're spending a good amount of our time.
Can you explain that? What do you mean by the owned is driving the earned?
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges we've had, one of the biggest struggles I've had, especially me personally, especially as I have been advocating the PESO model implementation for clients, is that not all, this is a gross generalization, but most clients want to do content that's really like feature and benefit related and aspirational. And if you buy from us, you're going to be part of this culture that gives back to the community. And like, nobody gives a shit, right? So we fight this battle a lot where we talk about the importance of creating narrative content and telling the story. So in some cases, it may be telling a customer story, but we do it from the perspective of talking about the customer and then bringing in how they use the product or service versus this customer uses our software and it's fantastic. And so we sort of have separated from our marketing brethren a little bit from that perspective when we let them focus on the feature and benefit content and we focus on the narrative. And when we do that, what we're finding is that, and sharing it on social and, doing those things, but what we're finding is that journalists are Googling, right? They do exactly what we do. And they're looking for content that supports whatever they're having, whatever story assignment they have, or whatever they're having to write about. And so because of that, they're finding our content and they're calling. So it's not you can't control it like you can when you're pitching, right? And it sort of is the inbound marketing approach, but it's the inbound marketing approach to journalists versus prospects and customers. So we're using that same process and theory to build awareness and thought leadership and expertise for our clients, that then the journalist calls and says, hey, I saw this article that you guys wrote about this and I'm writing about it too. And usually what they do is, the first phone call is getting more information and interviewing and those kinds of things. And then eventually the story comes out and the client's a big part of that story. And we didn't pitch it at all.
Wow. So essentially because of a blog post that a company wrote, shared on social, that got the attention of a journalist who happened to be writing about something similar. And so they were able to then, of their own volition, went over to your client.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not just blog posts. It's, it's case studies, it's videos, it's podcasts. We, almost all of our clients host their own podcasts. So, it's content in general that helps, because as long as it's optimized well, they're going to find it.
Yeah, definitely. So of course you need to get to the story and you need to get that published. And so that actually leads into our next slide, which is, how long does it take a story to get published? And so this is something that of course, all of us here in communications, it is the end all be all for us. It is our main goal. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the research that we did surrounding this. So first of all, last time that we were on the you were on the webinar, we focused a lot on pitch framework things like subject length, embedded link count, lead, whatever. But now we can see actually the breakdown of when journalists open the most pitches. One of the key takeaways that we found was that nearly all of the pitch responses, of course, if they were responded to, occurred by the second day that they were received. So, there's always questions about how do I do a follow-up? What's the best way to do follow-ups? And so I wanted to hear from you, what is your follow-up strategy?
I mean, we always wait. Yeah. At least 2 days. Please do not follow up before 2 days. But as I was preparing for this webinar, I went back and looked because I have a friend who has a Wall Street Journal article coming out. She pitched it on December 7th. On December 9th, she got a response. And then when she got that response, I think that was a Friday. I think she pitched it on Wednesday and I think she got a response on Friday. The reporter wanted something by Monday and she wasn't gonna be able to pull it off that quickly. So she was like, what do I do? And how do I do this? And so we talked about, so this is a little bit different than when you asked, but going back to the reporter to say, hey, listen, I can't get you this information by Monday, but I can get it to you whatever day it was at whatever time. So following up from that perspective, but it did take 2 days. I went back and looked last night. I was like, okay, how long did that take? And it took her 2 days to respond.
Wow, that's not bad at all. So that's interesting that you said wait 48 hours because there are a lot of people that say wait 1 day, including, that's something that I've noticed for myself, that if I wait 1 day, I'll get more responses that way too. But the 2 day approach is interesting. I think I'm going to A/B test that
You should.
and see how I do it.
Report back. Report back.
Yeah, we should all do that actually. So continuing on, let's talk about the actual placement itself, not just getting a response, but the actual placement in the media. So what we found at Propel is that so first of all, the majority of pitch opens happen within 1 hour of a journalist receiving the pitch. The majority of responses are within 4 hours, and then the majority of placements are, as you just said, 3 days. However, I can tell you that we at Propel, and I'm sure you've experienced this, sometimes you have a bylined article and you won't see that place for 4 or 5 months.
3 days? Who? I've never had it happen that fast, ever.
Really?
No. 3 days?
Well, we'll have to talk about strategies because I'm getting quite a good amount of 3 days, to be honest.
Well, the friend that I just mentioned, I mean, the Wall Street Journal's article still has not published. So we're working on what, 6 weeks, 5 weeks? They're still going through the process and building the story and everything, but it'll probably be 7 or 8 weeks before it's published. I guess maybe if you're pitching podcasts or blogs or things like that, that makes more sense. But 3 days, holy smokes.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the journalists, not only in the firm that I worked with, but also who I work with now, they'll want something yesterday. They kind of are on they're looking for not only submissions, but especially if you're dealing in tech, things are happening so quickly that they want to be the first. And of course, if you're not first, you're last in the tech world. So, a lot of what I've been seeing is that you do get usually a story within 3 days, a week, sometimes 2 weeks. I've also noticed though that if a journalist is taking their time, sometimes what they'll say, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, is they'll say, the story I wanted to write, I can't write it right now, but I'm holding on to this information for something else.
Yeah.
And that's always nice when you hear that. And but that then leads the question, if journalists sometimes are, right at the 10-yard line and need a quote right now, or sometimes, there's no way for us to know, what is your main strategy for pitching in advance, maybe be it pitching under embargo or even pitching thought leadership. Like, what's your main overarching strategy for that, if you have one?
We almost never pitch under embargo anymore because nobody abides by it. So usually what we do, especially if it's something major, is we'll go to one publication and say, this is happening. It's happening in 2 weeks. We'd like you to cover it. We're not taking this to anybody else, and then give them first right of refusal. So rather than quote unquote embargoing it, I guess technically that's what we're doing, but we give them enough time to be able to pitch it to their editor, get approval, do the interviews, and do all that stuff. So, and what we find is that most journalists really appreciate that approach. And then once that story has run, then we take it to our other targets, but that's typically how we do it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, that comes from understanding how media on the back end works. A journalist can't just write any story they want. They have an approval process. An editor can't just write any story they want. They have an approval process. And, by giving that amount of time, as a former senior editor, that would have been something that I wish would have happened way more often, not just, this is coming out today, do it now.
Right.
Which puts a lot of pressure.
It does. And usually they can't do that.
Exactly. So yeah, if we go, so let's move on a little bit to the next slide and go to, publish rates over time. This is our last data poll that we did on pitch conversion times. And we found the distribution of publish rates over time for all pitches that eventually result in a published article. And I found this to be insightful because it serves for me as an important reminder that, every pitching campaign is unique. You're never gonna, lightning sometimes strikes twice, but not often.
Right.
40%, if we look at it, 40% of pitches that result in a published article took over a month to be published, just as you were saying. 40%, that's still a significant amount of time. So, you know, it sounds like when you're prepping a blog post that spin sucks, like, are you doing that as well? Like how do you make your editorial calendar, and how do you determine, like the timing for a particular piece to go up?
On the blog, you mean, or?
Yeah, on the blog specifically.
Um, I should show you what we do. I'm embarrassed to say this.
Yeah, if you're willing to.
I use my notebook, and I have a page that says podcast or blog topics. And then, like, for January, for instance, I knew I wanted to do an entire month on the peso model. So in my handy dandy notebook, my Remarkable, I went through and I highlighted all the peso model topics I had. So one was measurement, one was attaching it to the sales funnel, one was a primer on the whole thing. So I went through and I highlighted, and then I built the editorial calendar around that. And then we also have guests once a week, and so we're trying to bring in guests that are focused on that. It's really not, we don't do it more than a month at a time. Like, I don't know what I'm doing in February yet. But we do try to keep that consistency in some fashion. And then there's some times where you're like, oh, this just happened, like a few months ago when everybody was talking about Dr. Pepper sending out an RFP and saying that the agency they chose wouldn't be hired or wouldn't be paid for an entire year. What? That's not how that works. So we're not banks. Like, no. So we set aside the editorial calendar to respond to that. And when Chat GPT became, like, everybody was talking about it, I did a podcast episode on that didn't fit in with the editorial calendar. So we try to be responsive to what's happening, but then have the more evergreen foundational content as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, just as comms people, you have an editorial calendar. It's so important to check the editorial calendar for whatever publication you're pitching. If you're pitching something about AI and this month they're talking about med tech, just take that one off the list. Like,
right.
They're not gonna respond to you about it for an entire month. And I know it's really difficult when you have to have, as you mentioned previously, let's say you're a boss or a manager wants to know how many people have been pitched. Let's say whatever organization you're representing really wants to be inside of this particular journal or in the side of this particular publication. I mean, it's really difficult to say this, but you have to take a step back and say, well, listen, they're not going to be writing about it. We can try, because what's the worst thing that happens? That we don't get a response and we just annoy a journalist that we have a relationship with, perhaps. But it's so important to be able to read those editorial calendars and really understand, okay, what is this publication going to be writing about? How can I insert myself into this publication? What type of hook can I use? And even if you're an AI company and you in this week this month the publication is doing something with medtech, okay, find a way to do it. Don't shoehorn it, but make it so that it flows naturally and that they'll actually want to talk to you. And fit you inside their editorial calendar.
Yeah. And sometimes you just have to ask, like, hey, Jen, we see you haven't decided what you're doing in February yet. How does this sound? Actually, that sounds great. Thank you.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next slide, and let's get a little bit off of publish rates over time into some send, open, and response times. Let's go back to our poll question a little bit, and we saw that the majority of people are pitching Tuesday, Wednesday, a little bit Thursday, almost not on Friday, and very, very little on Monday. But interestingly, one of the things that we found is that this quarter, the earlier it was in the week, the more pitches were being sent, and a lot were being responded to on Mondays, and Tuesdays of Q4, which we kind of were a little surprised at, or very surprised at. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the pitch days.
Right.
So, just do you have any thoughts as to why all of a sudden the back end of the week is now was bigger?
I mean, it could very well be like the poll we just saw that nobody's doing it. So the people that are getting responses. It seems strange.
Yeah, it does. But so my personal theory, and if anyone has any more insight into this, they're welcome to talk about it in the chat. It's Q4. You have a certain number of results that perhaps you have for a client, or you have OKRs that you need to fulfill, and you're trying to just maximize the week. I think that a lot of people were sending just to simply maximize the week.
That makes sense.
I actually felt myself doing that. Was as I was pitching Propel, starting around late November, early December, pitching earlier in the week to try to get more out and try to see, just try to start the week off a little bit earlier. Was that the right move? Well, I mean, we ended up with some pretty good results, so it worked for me. But I think that's kind of what I like. I think that pressure is
that
what
does
really
make
drove it.
sense. I mean, with the holidays in November and December, you pretty much are reduced to like 3 weeks in 2 months. So
exactly. So and let's switch something to a little bit more interesting, or something that we had a lot of fun with that Propel. We started actually looking at trending news topics. We wanted to see how were trending news topics being pitched and what those response rates were looking like. Because, as we all know, a lot of PR people like to tie in something that's relevant into a pitch to try to, get their organization's message across. So the very first thing that we looked at was inflation. So first of all, inflation, it's hitting everybody. I hear eggs in the United States have skyrocketed, which is insane to me.
And vegetable shortening. I went to buy vegetable shortening and I was like, I'm not paying $12 for shortening. Like, no.
Wow.
Yes.
My gosh. We've had egg shortages in Israel, but that's because of a socialized, government planned economy. The fact that it happened in the United States is taking all of us all over the world by surprise. Yeah.
Yes.
So of course, with inflation, we wanted to see, like, how are people pitching inflation, and is it working? And in short, no, it's not. There were approximately 7,000 pitches going out talking about inflation, trying to use inflation as a hook. Only 1.38% of those were getting responded to. It seems to us that if you're not really an economist, like, why are you pitching inflation? So, we kind of think that, if you're not able to shoehorn something, probably don't do it. Like, Gini, do you have any advice on, if there's something going on into the news, how do you kind of tie that into whatever organization you're representing, or you're trying to get, or whatever message you're trying to get across?
So I'm going to blame David Meerman Scott for this, because he's the one who wrote the book on newsjacking, and then everybody tried to do it. It works if your product or service or organization works with the topic. Where it doesn't work is where you, to your point, trying to shoehorn you in. And all that's going to do is make a journalist mad, because they're getting thousands of pitches, they get thousands of emails, and they don't want their time wasted. So I would say, if you're newsjacking, do it in a really smart, strategic way. Because you'll get results that way. But when you're trying to shoehorn in, like, anytime there's a celebrity death or something like that, everybody was like, what so-and-so's death can teach you about mental health, and I have a yoga instructor for you to talk to, and you're like, no. So, and that's actually happened. Just be really smart about it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Yeah. It's sorry, that threw me off that they wanted to pitch a yoga instructor for, being a mental health professional. That's fine. Yes. I mean, yoga is important in everything.
It is, but you're not a mental health professional.
Right.
I love yoga.
From Johns Hopkins.
Right.
Or I meditate every day, but I don't think I'm qualified to speak about mental health.
No, you're not.
But let's go on to something that was working. Tech, like technology, tech and new tech innovations. Those are things that tend to get a lot better response rates. So we looked at a bunch of different tech topics. We looked specifically at cybersecurity, of course, ChatGPT, which is an incredible piece of software if you're able to log on. It's been crashing recently if you've been trying to use it.
Is
and
chat GBT down? Yes.
Yeah. So, and of course, we saw a lot higher response rates to this. So specifically, we saw really, really great responses for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity actually got a 5.69% response rate, which is more than double the average. And so, what do you think is so interesting to reporters that cybersecurity has that perhaps inflation doesn't? Like, why would you think that this specific topic, or even the topic of tech in general, would have more prescience for a reporter as opposed to something tied to inflation?
I mean, I can kind of just guess, but we have a client who does a podcast for HR managers, and they had a cybersecurity expert on a couple of weeks ago. And I found the whole conversation really fascinating, because what he talked about is, and I think this is probably why it's so relevant, is that all of your employees are responsible for cybersecurity. And it's usually some well-meaning employee who clicks on something or opens something they shouldn't, or Adina, don't tell anyone that I told this story, but so you'll get a text message that looks like it's coming from your CEO that says, hey, I don't have time to talk, I'm in a meeting. Can you run to Target and purchase 10 gift cards and then send me the numbers? And it looks like it's coming from the CEO. And so the person who doesn't know, or doesn't really have any interaction, immediately goes, oh my gosh, the CEO is texting me, I'm going to go do this. And then they go buy 10 Target gift cards, right? That's happened. So I think that's part of it. Is it's such a hot topic right now. You can't tell her. And we are all trying to figure out how to maintain a level of security that everybody's responsible for. So I think that's part of it. And all of this spoofing and stuff, it looks real. And so you don't know, right? So I think part of it is that the media is really working hard to educate all consumers on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially from the cybersecurity perspective, and then now with ChatGPT, you don't really know who's writing to you anymore.
Right.
Although I must say, I did read the terms and conditions. I am one of 3 people on planet Earth that has. You do hypothetically have to put something is written by ChatGPT if you do use it. So just for everyone out there to know.
That's good to know.
Yeah, everyone out there to know, if you're writing a pitch or if you're writing like a byline article using ChatGPT and you don't clarify that and you get caught, then you and your organization can be in a lot of trouble. But speaking about ChatGPT, we had huge results on that. Again, 6.18% response rate, 1,200 pitches over the last quarter. And I think that, if we take this back to PR as opposed to just looking at technology, this is really it seems like the beginning of a news wave. Just like with any type of surfing, boogie boarding, what have you. If you start too early, the wave crashes over you. If you start too late, the wave passes you by. There are certain ways to really see where that wave is going, how it's cresting. And so, do you have, Gini, any like insight as to, okay, like this story is actually going to be good, this story is going to turn into a wave? Like have you ever thought about the industry in those terms?
Yes, of course, but I'm trying to think how we figure out that it's going to be a thing. When everybody was going from Twitter to, I can't remember the name of the news.
Mastodon.
Thank you. I kind of looked at that and went, meh, I don't think this is a thing. But then when everybody was started to talk about ChatGPT, I was like, oh, this is a thing. But I hate to say this, but I think it's just more gut and intuition and experience than anything. When Elon Musk was like, everybody has to use Clubhouse. And I was like, nobody's going to use Clubhouse. And it went like this. So I think some of that just comes with experience and just understanding how, just like you would with surfing. Like I could not go out to the ocean right now and go, that's the wave I'm going to catch, because I would fall flat on my face. Actually, I've torn a toenail off doing that. So I cannot do that. But I can, just because I don't have any experience surfing, but I can look, because I have experience in the PR industry. I can look and see, okay, this is something I think is people are going to catch on, and this is something that I'm just like, meh, or I'll wait and see.
Right. So
That's a
I could
terrible
tell you,
answer,
like,
but
I don't think it was that bad, because it brings up, like you said, gut feeling, and truly the only way to get that is it is by having the experience. I think a lot of us got into PR because we are news junkies. We do enjoy like keeping up to date with what's going on in the world. And I think that the longer that you have the more push notifications you have. I have way too many for news websites. You start to see, okay, like this is what's being talked about. This
fair,
is what's
yeah.
going on. And over the course of several years, especially if you're at the beginning of your career right now and listening to this, if you're able to read the news, try to read it 2 or 3 times a day, just to even skim the headlines. It takes time. But if you start to read the news 2 or 3 times a day, over the course of a year or two, you start to see, okay, this is the type of thing that is probably going to start working. This is the type of thing that has a larger effect on all these other industries or all these other stories. Be it, if you're in entertainment, if you're in cosmetics, if you're in AI, these are the things that I think, will actually have a good impact on the rest of the ecosystem. And by being able to see what that ecosystem looks like, I think you could start to see, okay, this is the wave that I'm going to start paddling out for.
The other thing I would say is pay attention to what other industry leaders are talking about, because that will tell you as well. That'll for sure tell you.
Yeah, 100%. So speaking of industry leaders and people telling us, you are an industry leader in the world of PR, and I wanted to start talking to you about your peso model and how that fits into your PR strategy, and how other people can start utilizing the peso model for their own PR strategies.
Yeah, so thank you. The peso model is paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And really the genesis of it in the beginning for us was, I run an agency. I've been running an agency for years. And in the beginning, we did crisis, reputation, events, and media relations. And what we found is that you would have these highs and lows, right? Or you would have peaks and valleys. And so there would be a new product release, or there'd be a big event, or there'd be something newsworthy to share, and you'd have these peaks. And then once the news cycle ended, you would have these valleys, and there was nothing filling those in. And I would have conversation after conversation after conversation with clients who were like, this is great. You just got us in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and the New York Times and blah, blah, blah. But it was sort of like, what can you do for me now? And I would get really frustrated, because you can't do that all the time. You're not going to be in the New York Times every day. That's not how it works. You're going to that's going to happen once, right? It's not going to happen more than that. Maybe twice or 3 times, but really it's not going to happen every single day unless you're the president of the United States. And so and this was several years, 10 years ago now, but we were looking at how do we fill in those valleys so that when we have the peaks, we also have other stuff going on that keep it consistent. So that, because we went through a period where we kept losing clients because they were like, I'm not going to pay you a retainer if you're only getting us media every month, every 2 months. And it was like, okay. So after I swallowed my pride and got over my frustration, I started to look at what was happening in the world. And this was at the time when, Twitter became a household name, LinkedIn had launched, Facebook was available to businesses, not just college students. So all of this stuff was happening, and blogging became really easy for people. We could start to film our own videos on our phones. All of this stuff was happening at the same time. And so I started to look at, okay, how can we do this? And we really started with earned and owned. We didn't add in the paid and shared until a few years later. So we were looking at, to my point that I talked about earlier, how can we partner earned and owned media together? And in some cases, it might be that we're contributing content to publications, which works extraordinarily well. And some cases, we're creating content that's really well optimized that journalists are finding. So we found a really good partnership there. And it started to even out so that we had more consistency in, okay, we may not get the New York Times every single month, but we're getting it, a couple of times a year. And at the same time, we're also getting the trade publications and the local media and, podcast interviews and things like that. And then we started to add in paid and shared after that. But really the way that we look at it, and if I were to put this in importance from a communications perspective, I would do owned media first, and then I would do shared or earned, and then I would do paid. But the reason it's not called OSP or OSEP is because it's harder to remember. So people are always like, well, it starts with paid. Don't I have to start there? No, you don't have to start with paid. The only reason it starts with paid is because peso is easier to remember. So really think about it as you're creating content on something that you own. So you're creating content that you are housing on your website or your blog. So you're creating content that if LinkedIn went away tomorrow, it wouldn't be a big deal. You'd still have your content. If YouTube folded tomorrow, it wouldn't be a big deal. You'd still have your videos. So that's your owned media. And then you're going to use shared media to distribute it, earned media to give it that credibility, and paid media to amplify it. So it really becomes a nicely integrated model that allows you to have consistency in results, measure the results that you're getting, and provide the opportunity to feel like you're all in all places at all times.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, it speaks to, what we're doing. And I think that, it would benefit everybody to, read a lot more into the peso model and see, how it works for people. I think for us, it's been, we've been using it and it's been working really well. So we don't have too much time left, but we're going to go back. We're going to go to some Q&As really quickly. But before we wrap up and we go to the audience Q&As, I have one quick question for you, Gini. What are some 3 lasting tips that you feel are key to succeeding in public relations today?
So we already talked about stop spraying and praying. Do not do that. Do not do that. Do not do that. The next one is measure everything that you do. And it's challenging because a lot of what we do is brand awareness, but there are lots of things that you can do to measure the work that you're doing, from branded search terms all the way to website traffic. And the last one is implement the peso model.
Definitely. All right, so now it's time for audience questions. Unfortunately, we only have about 4 or 5 minutes. So if anyone has anything that they'd like to ask, please drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you guys. And in the meantime, while people are thinking of questions or asking them, I'd love to know what happened in 2009. What did that look like from 2009 to around 2012, 2013? And do you think that we can expect to see a similar trend to that happening?
Yeah, I think we've seen not only did we see media outlets dissolve and all of our relationships go away, well, not go away, like they didn't die, but they went on to other careers. But at the same time, we had, like I said, we had all the social media come into play, and we had all of, some people were already doing content marketing like John Deere, but the internet made it easier for everybody, right? WordPress made it easier. There were all these tools that made it easier for anyone to be able to do it. Even my kid can blog at this point. With the smartphones got even smarter. So all of this happened at the same time. And so I don't think we're going to see the same sort of evolution, but I do think we're going to see a big push from a communication standpoint on fighting the misinformation, on helping brands and executives understand how to communicate values in a way that doesn't alienate everybody. The toilet paper company saying, out of an abundance of caution, we're closing our business. No, nobody cares. And then DE&I. So I think those are the 3 things that we should be thinking about.
Definitely. So that's really interesting. And I think also that, it's like the news is going to be spread out across more channels now. And I think that, going to, of course, mainstream media is going to remain the backbone of PR, but I think that we're also going to start having to look more into Substacks, yep, more into influencers, more into blogs, more into podcasters, YouTubers, etc. So we have a quick question. Can you give an example of a narrative owned versus non-owned?
Yeah, Misty, that's a good question. You know how I would define it is I would call marketing nonfiction and narrative communications fiction. So we're more like, we're not making up stories, of course, but we're doing storytelling. So it's really about the narrative of the story and bringing in your hero and your villain and, your competitor might be the villain and your hero might be the customer, but doing it from a perspective of telling a story that's engaging, and then let marketing handle while we need it, it's not as nonfiction isn't as engaging as fiction is. It doesn't help you escape somewhere else. So the work that we do, I think, helps us put prospects and customers, like they can visualize themselves in that same position, where the marketing stuff is more, this is what we do well, these are our features, these are our benefits, this is why you should buy.
So we have one final question, and this will be for more the managers or the owners of PR agencies that are joining us today. Did your retainer increase once you adopted Peso, given the increase in scope of the service you're providing?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, because now, and we still have clients though, or prospects who will call and say, we want PR. And I will say, do you want media relations, or do you want a fully integrated communications program? And they're like, media relations. And I'm like, that's not what we do. And I will refer that business out. So yeah, I mean, because we do all of it, we had to increase our retainers for sure.
Interesting. Amazing. So, well, Ginny, I apologize, but this is all the time we have. Everyone, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. Ginny, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and speak to us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And if anyone has any more questions or would like to learn more about Propel, you can reach me via email at eitan@propelmypr.com. Ginny, anything for you?
Spinsucks.com.
Spinsucks.com is pretty great. I'm not going to lie. I read it a lot. And I actually do listen to your podcast a lot. It's really informative and it's helping me a lot.
Good.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great day if you're in the North America or South America. A great evening if you're over on my side of the world. Bye, everybody.
Bye.